We have a very special guest. You know him as TV film writer Evan Ball. What's up, man?
Hello, man. Happy to be back. It's been a while, so I'm happy to be here with you and have a good time talking all the fun nerdiness.
That's right. I'll try to keep the pandemic going, the pandemic live streams going. Well, hopefully not the pandemic itself. My camera just went out. Ladies and gentlemen, I've got no signal. Hold on a second. This is okay. We're back. Yeah. So Evan, man, it's been a minute, so I want to catch up with you. What's been going on? What's been going on with you?
Well, it's pandemic, so as much as I've been working very hard, the business has slowed down a little bit. So let's see. I remember. Okay, so I had worked on season 1 of Titans. I worked on season 1 of Stargirl. I moved away from that and worked on adapting like a book, this African fantasy novel that I'm actually still literally. I had a pre-pitch meeting today because we're going to take that out to buyers, hopefully. I worked on Colin in Black and White on Netflix. So that did really well for us at the end of last year.
That's right. It was trending like number 1 for a while.
Yeah, we did really well. I think we may have peaked at 6, something like that. It was, it was good. And, award consideration and stuff like that. So like you're happy when people are excited about your stuff. We were on a lot of like shows in 2021 that you have to see type thing. That was really good. Right. And then right now, since it's the new year and we're getting ready to head into pilot season and all that, a lot of the new shows are starting to ramp up and think about hiring. So I'm taking meetings for where they're doing this year.
I hear you. Yeah, I guess I did see Colin on the front page of Netflix. Didn't know the position it ended up at. So you're busy. You're busy all the time.
I stay busy as much as I can, dude. As much as my wallet will allow me, I will take the work. The thing is, like, it's so interesting because coming in this industry, you're always juggling back and forth between taking the jobs that you need to pay all the bills, but also like, is there a way you can be selective about the jobs you take to shape your career toward a particular direction? So that's kind of what I've been juggling. And so I ended up turning some stuff down last year that toward the end of the year when things I had worked on ended up not getting picked up or not going forward. Oh, man, I use that paycheck. But again, now it's the new year. You just get back on the train and start, trying to figure out what the next gig is.
Yeah, I mean, and you've been pretty fortunate, it sounds like. Also, you said to me the other day that you have not set foot in an actual writer's room. But you're doing the Zoom calls, right? It's been how long?
The last time I was physically in a room was March of 2020. Okay. And that's like right when everything started shutting down, right? Like I remember specifically we may have been in the office when the big announcement came from the NBA that they were canceling games that night and all that. And everybody was like, oh shit, this is real. Yeah. My bad if I need to keep the language down.
That's fair.
Yeah. And so I think the next week we went home and I haven't been back. Not a single meeting, not a single room. Everything's been over Zoom. So I've been home. And it's a blessing and a curse. It's nice to be home and kind of work at your own pace and schedule when you can. But it's also, I really miss being in a writer's room and spending time with people. Because so much of the work that you do while you're off task, I think does really help enriching the stuff that you end up doing when you're on task. You get to know people and kind of get a sense for what their interests are, where they came from, their background and all that. And when it's on a Zoom, you're so focused. You don't really get to have as many of those conversations. So you don't get to be like, oh, don't you say so about blah, blah, blah back over there about a water cooler? Don't you think that could apply here? And then like you get some really ideas.
There's like a whole, there's like a whole like dynamic of like shower thoughts and stuff like kind of.
Exactly.
Like the weird thing is I get weird on Zoom. Like I do this show every day, but I'm like, I feel weird being on screen because then when I start talking, I'm like the only one on screen and everybody's looking at me. I don't know. There's like a weird psychological block I got going on with that. But hey, is this Will?
Well, go ahead.
Just shouting out to Is This Will? He's in the chat. Is This Will? If you got a question for Evan Ball, because we were talking last night, with Will, especially about George Lucas and the book of what'd you call it, Mandalorian. So, yeah. What were you gonna say?
Oh man, I don't remember, but I'm happy to talk about that. One, I really enjoyed The Mandalorian, and two, I have many a thought on Book of Boba Fett. It's been an interesting ride so far.
Right.
Catch me up a little bit,
Well,
explainer.
First of all, I'm sure we'll get to that, and then we'll get super in depth. But I wanna get your take on what do you think the best writing has been on TV right now, and obviously the movies just got the Oscar nominations today. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's always such a hard one, because it's funny because questions like that come up like at almost all the general meetings and things you do when you're just getting to know execs. They're like, oh, what are you watching right now? What do you think is great? What would you write on? Yeah. And there are literally 10 billion things out right now. There's 500 networks and streaming services and all that stuff. And so I've never caught up on any of it. It was so funny because I was it really is. I was talking about Euphoria the other day with my girlfriend, and how I thought season 1 of Euphoria was incredibly strong, and season 2 felt like it was going off the rails a little bit, and I couldn't understand what they were doing, because it felt like whatever the main thread of season 1 had been a little bit lost in season 2.
Right.
And then I just saw this last episode 5, I think, that just premiered
Everybody's
on Sunday.
chatting about that. I saw it was trending. Like, I don't know it. I haven't seen it yet, even though shout out to my friend Bruce Wexler, who plays Zendaya's dad in the show.
Okay.
But he's actually, I've known Bruce since 2005, which is hilarious because now he's working, and I remember I ran into him last year, and I was like, dude, I run into him. See, I run into him at auditions because we both got curly hair. So like,
that's a pretty distinct casting call.
2 or 3 times a year, we're just like, we bump into each other. We catch up in the casting room. So the last time I saw him, I was like, so you gonna be in season 2? What's going on? And turns out he's in like flashbacks, I guess. But I saw today everything was trending about Euphoria. I haven't seen it, but you're saying people seem to be outraged. I don't know what's going on. Like, what's...
Well, look, it's a show. Euphoria is a show that is very intentionally like hyper real, right? And it's not just in its situations that are like off the wall bonkers, but in its visual presentation, it wants you to know that you're having this kind of wild experience when you're watching the show. So, I think there's a way you watch Euphoria that is not like, it's not a documentary. It's not a regular grounded drama. It is a fancified, hyper realistic. It's almost like the whole show is a drug trip. Mm-hmm. And so you got to see it through that lens. But yeah, I thought this last episode was incredible. Everybody's going to be talking about Zendaya getting another Emmy for it, and well deserved. Nice. She's incredible. And really the ability for that show to write really tense situations and kind of build up to it in ways, because like it has its moments where it's just like playful and fun and it's doing things and you're just like, these are just kids acting wild, and then it has its moments where it just really nails some super tense situation, and that's the stuff you see a lot of people talking about, or the memes come around or whatever of this person. I'm trying to like not have spoilers now.
I know. But, I appreciate that, because I will
those situations when they hit, like you're on the edge of your seat, and that's some of the best stuff on TV, period.
That's dope. And Zendaya really is dope. I mean, we could talk about Spider-Man in a little bit, but she was really good in the latest Spider-Man movie. I was like, dang, she upped her game, probably from working on TV for the last couple of years, or at least doing a really intense show like that. But let's see. Question for Evan.
Gave her more to do.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like if you give her something to chew on, looks like she goes for it. So, I was really impressed with just her performance in like the biggest movie ever that came out the other couple months ago. It's crazy. It's crazy stuff. It's nuts. Question for Evan and Ari: are you fans of Clint Eastwood what's the got the Marconi? What's the I'm not sure.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Yes, the Clint Eastwood westerns.
Like the Drifter
really
reference
talking about
in
the Sergio Leone ones. He was talking about Ennio Morricone, who does a lot of the music for stuff like that. Like, those. I think you, as somebody who is a fan of sci-fi and of kind of epic hero-focused cinema, the Clint Eastwood westerns, like, mandatory studying for that.
Right.
And, they all go about in a slightly different way, but they give you epic scale. They give you determined characters and fascinating characters. They give you, like, pretty easy to understand stakes. They give you characters who are like a force of nature themselves. Great villains, man. They're super fun.
I'm also a fan. I remember when I was a kid, there was like every night, it was the Man with No Name series. Like each night was a different movie. And I was like committed. I was like, I was like 10 or 11 or 12 or something. And I just like, I'm going to watch each one of these because I know the significance. I know that they're important. And I really liked them. I dug them. They're intense. And again, like you said, it's very easy to understand stakes and good guy, bad guy, white hat, black hat. And and I think he's trying to, he's segueing that into the Book of Boba Fett. I don't know if you saw the most recent episode. Now, you had the Drifter walk into town. Blueface McGee. I don't know what his character name was, but
Cad. Why can't I think of it? Cad Bane.
Cad Bane.
Bane. There we go. Cad Bane. Yeah. Dude. Book of Boba Fett's been interesting because it feels. I'm really struggling with it in a way that it feels like this character that I've known and loved for a long time, that's been known as being the kind of most ruthless, the most like kind of Machiavellian. A bounty hunter, feared bounty hunter in all the galaxy. I'm watching his retirement and watching him try to now become the moral center of a story when I'm not used to him being that character. So I'm like, it's tough for me to wrap my brain around that, given that I have 30 plus years of love and enjoyment of Boba Fett outside of this. Yeah. And I also think that makes sense when people are resonating so much more with The Mandalorian in these last two episodes, because he's somebody like who is existing in the context that we understand him, because we just met him a year ago or whatever, that was a year or two ago. So it feels cohesive when we go back to The Mandalorian and we're seeing him talk about Grogu, and we're seeing him, handle bandits and the way he handles bandits, and revisiting his own characters in this kind of Western style that we just haven't seen Boba Fett as I want to sit at home and treat people well and be a benevolent ruler. Like, that's a weird thing for me to.
Yeah, to me, Boba Fett serves that niche of Empire Strikes Back, this mysterious bounty hunter who's like, I got to bring this guy to Jabba. This is I think, one of the worst additions to the special edition of Star Wars A New Hope. And I'm not sure if we talked about this, but, I think you'll appreciate this because of your TV and film writing prowess. The edition that they made where they added big old gross slug Jabba to that scene with Han Solo in the hangar destroys the reveal in Return of the Jedi, because you've got A New Hope. So he's mentioned. Han Solo says, I gotta pay Jabba. So that's his like
on my head.
Yeah, and he's like, I gotta. And so he leaves, but then, spoiler alert, he swoops in, helps save the day. Second movie, Empire Strikes Back. Listen, I gotta leave. I gotta go pay this dude off. I gotta go pay this guy Jabba. He mentions him by name. And we still don't see Jabba. And then in Return of the Jedi, when we're at Jabba's palace, it is like one of the greatest reveals, this giant slug. And I think George Lucas kind of missed his own point. on that. Like he kind of ruined, and even if you watch the all of the Star Wars movies in chronological order, it ruins all of the reveals. By the time you get to The Empire Strikes Back, when he's like, "I'm your father," it's like, yeah, I know, I saw episode 3.
We got that, yeah. So it's so on that specific point, to me, it's really interesting because I understand the urge for that, and at the same time, I'm with you as a fan that feels like it ruins something, because that scene that you're talking about where they brought Jabba back in A New Hope was a scene that was shot, and it was shot with like a man as Jabba the Hutt. They hadn't conceived of him yet as being this slug. So, when he walks around behind him and he steps on the tail, they had to digitally do that and all that because and so I get the sense, I get the urge to be like, hey, this is what I wanted to do originally, and I want to put it back in because now I have the ability to do it when I didn't then.
Yeah.
On the other hand, one of the things that when you're making a movie or a TV show or something, you end up with budget constraints, you end up with technology constraints and things like that, and you get these creative limitations that force you to have to like pivot and figure something out. And a lot of times, some of your best material comes out of the fact that you don't have the capability to do the thing that you initially wanted to. So now you end up like, okay, let me pivot to this, blah, 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 blah. And you get a lot of these happy accidents that happen along the way that are like what you're saying. Now you have 2 movies of buildup of who Jabba is. We've had this like cloud of Jabba's wrath hanging over Han Solo. And now when we get to the reveal, and we're like, this fat slug is like that dangerous crime lord. It's a really jarring revelation, and you love that. So yeah, I think one of the big problems, at least from a fan's perspective, about the way Star Wars has been treated has been a lot of like, how much can we retcon in the process versus like, let those things be what they were because they were masterpieces, and just see if we can build going forward from that.
Yeah, and serve those. And I think particularly Boba Fett as a character, he serves his purpose fully as a character in those movies, I think, because he's like mysterious. He brings Han Solo back to Jabba. He's in Return of the Jedi and dies, and then he's done. But now they've got this whole series, The Book of Boba Fett, which, by the way, what do you think about the last 2 episodes of The Book of Boba Fett being just episodes of The Mandalorian? Do you think that they are... do you think that... Now, I don't know if this goes on, but maybe you have some insight on this. Do you think they just jumped to the first 2 episodes of The Mandalorian in this season? Or...
no, so my understanding is that COVID made shooting really difficult for a lot of these things.
Yeah.
And my guess, I don't know, I'm not really speaking on their behalf, but just kind of my guess is that they probably weren't able to shoot as much content as they had hoped. So maybe they did, as a result, pull some Mandalorian because they knew that was going to be happening later anyway, and that they were filming it and that they had time to, bolster Mandalorian episodes. But I guess what I'm saying is, it doesn't appear to me that they finished a full season of Book of Boba Fett and said, okay, let's do this instead. Let's pull the Mandalorian into it because we don't have enough to do or whatever. Like it appears to me as something that probably was a decision that was made along the way. Like, hey, we're shooting concurrently. We need some stuff because we keep getting shut down for XYZ or whatever.
Got you.
That'd be my guess.
What do you do in a situation? Like, does the writer's room just have a meltdown? Like, because you got to like...
Well, look, there's not really a writer's room for this, right? Like, if you look at every episode, it's basically Jon Favreau, right? So,
and Filoni, yeah.
And given that their creative team is super small, between Favreau, Filoni, Robert Rodriguez in this, I like that they brought Bryce Dallas Howard back in to do some directing and that.
Her episode was dope.
It was incredible.
Yeah.
It allows them to be really nimble in this way, and that's something that's really good. It doesn't cost Disney a lot more money to like bring everybody back in and just say, okay, we got to re-break the season. It's just like a handful of people who are already working on that, and they're working on Mandalorian, and they're working on whatever the next series is they're going to do together. So they just like, okay, well, this is our problem. Let's see how we can fix it. Just kind of hit the keyboard.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to figure out is what's the function of this series for Boba Fett? Like, coming out of this series, what are we supposed to take away from where Boba Fett is in the galaxy, what role he's going to play in relation to any other characters that we're going to see?
Yeah.
Like, why are we interested in that?
Well, I've been complaining about it a little bit on the show. Hey, Studio 8H, welcome. He says, they say, evening Aristotle, evening Evan. Let's just catch up with some of it. Almost feels like the Book of Boba Fett. The Boba is season 3 of Luke Cage, when Luke took over the club and becomes the mob boss of Harlem, says Is This Will. I think maybe we're underestimating the potential interconnectedness of the story, since the show is a direct spin-off and was launched with the final episodes of Mando season 2.
I think that's right.
Yeah. Yeah, and they are both.
My bad, I'm talking over you. Go ahead.
No worries. I was just gonna say, I feel like they're both shot on the volume stage, so maybe they're like, just both all available in that location. But go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I think there's a point there. It's pretty obvious they're positioning Boba Fett. Like, if you think about how Ahsoka has operated so far, or kind of what they're doing with Luke, they're kind of trying to like put people in different places in the Mandoverse.
Yeah.
And I think right now it feels like it's centering the Mandalorian to be able to check in with them, and for them to be able to come in from time to time. But I guess what I'm saying is, not for the broader universe, but for Boba Fett himself. Like, why is this not a 90-minute movie that's just like he lands on Tatooine, whoops some people's ass? I mean, essentially what we're seeing is an 8-episode or whatever, however many episodes, 6 or whatever it is, version of season 2, episode 1 of The Mandalorian, where like he shows up, he's the new person, he cleans up the problems in town and gets everybody to play nicely, and then now he's kind of like the big dog. And like, so we saw that in 1 episode of The Mandalorian, and this is being stretched out, and it's like, for what purpose for Boba Fett? Just so he has like a home base where we could come visit him from time to time? Maybe.
I mean, I similarly have an issue with that, because I'm like, all right, even Luke wanted to get off of Tatooine. Why are we hanging out in the sand, desert, dirt planet? Like, why we? Because once you have like a guy in Star Wars who just hangs out in one spot, it just, to me, it's kind of defeats the idea. It's kind of like Star Trek Deep Space Nine, where Star Trek was all about exploring strange new worlds, and then Deep Space Nine said, we're gonna just hang out here where no one can find us, and it's gonna be a soap opera because we just hang out all day and there's nothing to do. So I feel like that's kind of the problem with having Boba Fett just in the palace, just walking around in the sand and the dirt all day. But then you cut to Mando, Bryce Dallas Howard's episode, where it's like basically a Mandalorian episode. We're going to different planets. We're going to different cities. We're getting all these different vibes that Star Wars provides. Like that's kind of, I don't know. That's what I want from Star Wars.
In general, I'm also just getting sand planet fatigue. We had so much of, like ultimately the sequels came back down to Tatooine or some other version of a sand planet. I forget exactly where Rey was in the beginning. And we just saw Dune, which we know all of these stories are pulled from or largely inspired by in the first place, which is all about the big sand planet again.
And that was Will's point last night. He's like, George Lucas is a hack. He just copied Dune. And I'm like, hang on a second. Hang on.
I mean, look, everybody copied Dune. If you look at how much influential, I mean, it's like Dune, Neuromancer, things like that. like the whole range of sci-fi pulls from one or both in different ways. That's just kind of how art is evolved and stories are evolved through genre over time. I'm not really bothered by that. But I'm ready to not be on a sand planet. And that's why these last 2 episodes were so refreshing. We're like, oh my God, like I felt like I had to dump the sand out of my own shoes.
Change of scenery. I'm just like, I always say Star Wars A New Hope, when I was a little baby child watching that movie, I was like, okay, they got robots, that's dope, but they're just walking around in the sand. When are the Star Wars? And even as a kid, that part of the movie was kind of slow for me. And my brothers would be like, no, you got to stay awake, because it was on TV or something. Like, stay awake, there's a big space battle at the end. And I fell asleep. On the sand.
I mean, even to Star Wars is great, right? Like, Act 1 is in the sand, Act 2 is in the Death Star, and then Act 3 is back in the Death Star, but they had just had to go back and visit Yavin 4, right? So, like, we at least are getting some movement. And I have a question for you, actually. Have you noticed, or has it jumped out to you as much as it's jumped out to me, that there's different areas of, and I think it's to this point, I think they're aware of it, when they've gone into the cities, the not Mos Eisley cities, but I forget whatever the cities are that they're going into that's directly adjacent to the palace. It kind of like dips into cyberpunk a little bit, the way where it's like kids on motorcycles and there's like their glasses and stuff. I'm like, whoa, like where are we now? I'm so confused.
100%. That's what I was getting. I was getting some like non-Star Wars vibes from that. Like some of the kids did, and they just put like a thing on their ear, like a piece of metal. Now you're a Star Wars character, and they've got all these kind of modern haircuts that you would just see on the street today, which I guess Star Wars had in the 70s, but
yeah, it was then. It was 70s fashion.
Yeah, so it's kind of does jump out at me as incongruous with what we've seen in Star Wars, and it does kind of take me out a little bit. Like they're trying to update it, like they're trying to update Star Wars, which is kind of timeless, and the whole idea is to have it be of no time. So
see, I wouldn't mind it if it was in a different location that hadn't already been established. Like if you go to I don't know, the undercity of Coruscant that we've never seen, and we want to explicitly juxtapose that or contrast that to what we've seen with the senators and the Jedi Temple and everybody who's on the top, and we're like, oh, down here it's cyberpunky or whatever. Like I get that kind of switch, or if it's a completely different planet or something like that. But when it's everything we've seen Tatooine in like 1900 movies, and now we're like, oh, but it's a little different and around the corner on that block.
Right, like we never saw it before. Suddenly, there's like all these cyberpunk kids.
It's like this is a planet that has literal moisture evaporators because it is so arid there that they have to try to suck water out of the air. And then we have a whole group of people whose livelihood and aesthetic does not match that.
100%. And that's, I mean, I can only imagine that, like, well, as someone who does acting, that is something that I kind of think about. But when you're writing, you're like, you've got to think of all of those factors. You got to put all of those things together. Like, what is this place? How do you live in this place? So tell me a little bit about that process when you're coming up with.
Well, it's so for me, there's a lot of that too, because depending on what I'm working on, right? Like you're always trying to balance a few things, and maybe this is what's going on there. And I think ultimately, no matter what they do, they're going to have some resistance from us as longtime Star Wars fans, because as fans of when you're a fan of something so long, and you're a part of a community of a fan base like that, you tend to take some ownership over it. And so you kind of feel like the right way it's supposed to be done, and no one else does. But when you're writing, you're juggling a lot of things. Story should come first, typically, but you're also trying to make it relevant to the moment. You're trying to make it something that I imagine with something like this is approachable to people who aren't 30 years deep in Star Wars, right? Like you should be able to kind of come in fresh and say, oh, I have my way into this. And I imagine also, just based on what we were saying about it being 70s, I'm sure they're intentionally trying to modernize in a way that hopefully will carry them forward in the future.
Right.
So stuff like that, I mean, that's a tough collection of things to juggle to try to make really amazing work out of. And I think, this isn't to say that everything that they've done on these shows or even on Boba Fett has been a negative thing. It's just there are a few stumbling blocks that, I've had, that you've had, and other people have had. But the series isn't over. I'm curious to see where it's going to go.
We're going to have that watch party. Tomorrow we have got the season finale watch party for Boba Fett at 6 p.m. Christina Hooks says, just a quick shout out to Bryce Dallas Howard. I love seeing her name at the end of a great episode. Yeah, I think the 3 episodes of Christiana, sorry, my bad. I don't know if I said that correctly, but yeah, her 3 episodes eventually got better and better. As she's gone. Like the first episode in the first season, pretty good. Second episode she did amazing. This last episode she did 2 weeks ago, fantastic. I just was like, this is the best episode of The Mandalorian, and it's the Book of Boba Fett.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's see. So Isis Will says it was a black market cyber surgery hideout, and it is all 3 films and X years removed from A New Hope on a planet that already had land speeders and weird animals in jazz bands with laser blasters and flight suits. Yeah. Like, so, we've gotten a taste of the aesthetic. I mean, it does feel like they're trying to update it a little bit, and it kind of does, suddenly you've got, like you said, people that don't really match the surroundings of what's going on.
Well, it's also tricky because when you're telling stories that are in between, right? Like we know what happens before and we know what happens after. So there's actually not a ton of room to maneuver to try to, because like the aesthetic in the sequels isn't too different than it is in the originals. Yeah. Just like even bringing, it's so funny, bringing the Naboo starfighter in for Mando was like, oh shit, like, does this fit right now? Because it's a little different look, but at least that's kind of a past era at the same time. But it doesn't, either way, the stuff that we're seeing in this show, some of the stuff we're seeing in the show, stuff we've never seen, that's really cool. And some of it is a little harder to tangle with because, and I just think it's specifically because it's in places that are so familiar to us and not in new places where we're going to open our minds up a little more, at least for me.
It's interesting that you mentioned the Naboo jet, the starship that they converted so that it's now his. But you notice what they did to it. They dirtied it up and they made it Star Wars. They made it, more like the 70s Star Wars and not the 90s Star Wars. So that is interesting. Also, you said something about how you want to sort of make new shows and new work that is of its time in a way. There was something about the one thing I liked about the prequels, or at least Revenge of the Sith, George Lucas was doing that classic sci-fi thing where he's like, I am going to reference modern culture in this movie. I'm going to do like an allusion toward what's going on in the real world, which is, I think, what a lot of great sci-fi does. It kind of makes you see everything that's going on around you through a different lens. And that's, how do you feel like the Book of Boba Fett and Mandalorian are doing? Do you think that they're sort of up their own ASSs like with the story?
I just don't
or are they referencing like modern culture in any way?
I don't think that, because of the scale we're operating on, right? So I thought that like season 2, episode 1 of The Mandalorian was kind of what we were talking about in referencing that Clint Eastwood era film. And I think that with these television shows specifically, just by the nature of them being television shows, we are going to spend more time with just the characters and what they're going through and what their relationships are. There's some things that are kind of, that they could tell stories, but because they're telling them episodically, right? The arc of the season is the character story, right? And then episodically, it's like, oh, I helped these people, I found this thing, I slayed this beast, whatever it was.
Right. And they slowly
I think that makes it difficult. That makes it a little more difficult to do kind of grander commentaries on larger society. Just because you're shrinking the amount of time you have, unless you wanted to make the whole season of it. Whereas like with a movie, a lot of times, especially an epic sci-fi piece, that this isn't. I don't think these are going too hard sci-fi. Honestly. And I'm not saying that as a critique. I'm saying that because they've leaned so hard on these Western themes and stuff like that, they're actually grounding the series a lot.
And they're fantasy film. They're fantasy. I would categorize all of Star Wars as fantasy. That just has a different backdrop. People. Like Game of Thrones has a different backdrop, and it's all fantasy. But let's see, what do we got here in the comments? Regarding cyberpunk and Star Wars, we get in Empire Strikes Back retroactively in Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, with Luke, Anakin, and random aliens and Empire forces, and then nada. Yes, I'm
not sure what you're referencing, honestly. Like, where's the cyberpunk in Empire?
I do. Yeah, I don't remember the cyberpunk in Empire, but I am remembering a scene, which was a funny scene. I enjoyed it. It might have been in Attack of the Clones, where the actor who was in The Matrix, who played Mouse, I think, he's like, would you like some death sticks? And then Obi-Wan's like, you're going to go home and rethink your life. He's like, I'm going to go home and rethink my life. That was kind of a really funny.
That's hilarious.
That scene did have kind of like this like more modern looking attire going on, like costumage. So
sure,
maybe that, but I don't know. It felt like cybernetics were completely ditched in episodes 7 through 9. They're saying, so you're saying like literal, actual cybernetics and.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. I actually didn't make that observation. Like they didn't give Kylo Ren a robotic arm or anything like that.
Yeah.
Interesting. Now we were talking about Zendaya and how she's fantastic. And I saw the Spider-Man movie 3 times in the theater. I loved it in every way. It seems like such a challenge, and Zendaya is incredible in it. She's like, I was just like, she is so good in this dang movie. It's now that challenge. Spoilers, guys. Spoilers.
All the spoilers for Spider-Man No Way Home.
It's the biggest movie in the world. If you haven't seen it yet, come on now. Hey, Judella19. Hank Green did a video on why he thinks Star Wars can't be considered fantasy. I'll put it in the Discord later. Yes, I want to see that. Hank Green's an interesting guy. He's got some cool thoughts. Now you saw Spider-Man's. I'll call
3 times in the theaters.
There you go. So Jinx. Now, how? To me, that was like a triumph in making. I think Will has a differing opinion on all of the things mattering. To me, I was like, there's 20 years of Spider-Man now on the screen. And to me, the writing was, all of the characters had a reason to be there in the way that they set it up. And I love that they made everything count. In my opinion, they made everything count. They just were like, yep, that all counts, all going back to your childhood from watching 2002 Spider-Man to now. Like, why can't Star Wars do that?
Man, look, the answer is really, how come nobody can do what Marvel can do? Because if you think about it, while this specific movie was about tying together, 5 other movies, 6 other movies, whatever it was, 7 other movies into this one, and planning for future ones, and like you said, making you feel that every character that's in this movie is a fully realized character and not just like a cheap cameo.
Yeah.
They've been doing that. Marvel's been doing that over the course of their series now for over 10 years. And like, say what you will about, I mean, it's not that Marvel's beyond critique. You know, there's the Marvel third act thing that everybody talks about. There are some movies that hit better than others. But the sum total of what they've been able to achieve and weave these characters in and out and have them grow between films and tell a story that feels like it makes sense and is building towards something, it's like nothing else ever seen in cinema. So, you know, to me, it's not just how come no one else can tell this story. It's like, it's almost like it's an unachievable goal that no one else can do it. It's amazing. Like, I walked into this movie thinking, kind of just like, another nostalgia bait movie. I don't know if I'm going to be excited about this. I was just like in tears. It was so good. It was so much fun. And like, I am, those are the types of movies that I walk out of just super happy and hopeful. And I'm just like, that is the thing that I aspire to be able to do some point in my career. I want to do something that good. Like, that's what drives me to the movies. Got you.
Yeah, that's exactly, you know, sitting in that movie theater experience. I got to see it at TCL on IMAX at the Chinese theater. And that crowd was just so raucous, off the hook, just so losing their minds. And I was like, this is why I go to the movies, to see and experience a movie like this, with all of that with just all of that drama, and everything mattered, everything counted. All the acting was great. I mean, how good was Green Goblin getting his due? Because you've got Willem Dafoe, an incredible actor with an interesting look, perfect casting for the character, getting to show his face, because they had the big dumb mask in the first movie. And
we're like, okay, we're done with that.
We're literally going to just smash the mask, and we're going to get to see Green Goblin's face.
It was amazing to me because it's a movie where most of the other movies that you get really excited about that have been really good, especially even in the Marvel universe, have had a really distinct villain on the backside of it that have carried it along the way. You think about how great Killmonger was in Black Panther. You think about how fantastic it was seeing Thanos develop through multiple movies and then show up in Infinity War and just be like, oh, this is what we're going up against. Yeah. And No Way Home managed to do this kind of with playing shuffleboard or whatever with who the actual villain is, right? Like, for the first half of the movie, it's just Peter fucked up and he's just trying to fix his mistake, and you just feel for him because you see the stakes of how he spared everybody's lives in the process. And then it's like, oh, we gotta watch out for Jamie Foxx, he might mess around. Oh, we gotta watch out for Doc Ock, he's gotta mess around. And they're playing this like, hide the villain, who's the villain, blah, 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 right? And then when, you get the reveal again that Green Goblin's been kind of just biding his time and hiding for a little bit to ultimately like want to take over, with that being one, the first villain that we had in the Tobey movies, but two, being somebody that kind of appears as the villain late in the movie. It's pretty insane that movie was still as good as it was. Very often you're just, if you don't know who the villain is or what the real like force of evil is, okay, yeah, you can be kind of lost and lose stakes. But they managed to do it, and especially because it was somebody that you were cheering for. You wanted to see Green Goblin, after all this time, go right and have his relationship with Tobey get worked out and everything. They knew how to tug the exact emotional chords that you were bringing. Right.
You know what I was really impressed. That's an interesting take. You know what I was really impressed with. Interesting takeaway from the movie was that in the midpoint we get two more Spider-Men, basically, or past the midpoint. So, and then they have a full mini arc, but it's also an arc that goes back all the way 20 years, goes back all the way 10 years, and you're like, dang, this is satisfying. Things we thought about, wondered about, where things were headed in their movies. And I was just, incredibly impressed with how they were able to just succinctly do that in half a movie.
It's amazing. One of the things why I love Empire Strikes Back, kind of to quickly go back on Star Wars so much, is the reveal that or that Vader is Luke's father is super interesting because it recontextualizes not just that moment, but the previous film too. And this is exactly what you're talking about. We're talking about being able to have moments, character achievements, things that don't retcon necessarily the things that had happened before, but build on it to bring us this extra level of satisfaction. And like, that's the thing that I want out of Star Wars going forward, right?
100%.
I don't want as much retconning. I don't want you to try to tell me like, hey, I know you thought it was this thing, but it's actually this other thing. I want like earned character achievements and earned moments that give me exciting new feelings going forward based on what I already know.
Yes. And that's the trick. That is the thing, you said in Empire, now we've built on what we already know, and now there's this huge reveal. Spoiler alert. Okay. Listen, Darth Vader is Luke Skywalker's father. I'm just going to let you know that now. But that's the trick. That is really the ultimate trick, is to give us new information that recontextualizes everything we know about what we thought we knew. And that the Star Wars movies each do that in several ways. Also they recontextualize how we think the Force works. Each movie, it shows us another angle of the Force, and that's, I think, through all 9 movies, technically. And that was always something that I always looked forward to. Like, I mean, I freaking loved that reveal in Episode 8. I thought it was as good as a reveal as any in any Star Wars movie when Luke wasn't there. Luke was projecting himself. That, to me, is what it's all about. It's like recontextualizing the entirety of the show. I don't know if Mando or Boba Fett is doing that in any way.
I don't think either of them. I mean,
Mando,
I don't know that they are, but they are adding depth to the lore of Star Wars. Like, that's what's really exciting about it, right? Like, Mandalorian, to me, is super fun because instead of seeing what happens that's deciding the fate of the galaxy, we're seeing these kind of micro stories that are about like actual people's lives and just like the stakes that matter to people who aren't in the Galactic Senate. They look up and they see those battles. They're not in those battles.
True. And there's something to be said about that. That is also going on in that universe where, there are the smaller, not lower stakes, but I mean, you got to make it compelling. And Boba Fett is not as compelling as I would like it to be, because it's like you're saying, like, what do we do with Boba Fett? How do we? What would you do with Boba Fett as far as trying to be like? It's like, Evan, we got a series. People seem to love the toy Boba Fett. We want to make it a show. We want to make 6 episodes. How would you bring us a new context for Boba?
Well, it's tough because there's kind of 2 things going on here. One, we already have the Mandalorian that has played with the Bounty Hunters Guild and like what the Mandalorian culture is about and all of that, and we're intentionally trying to distinguish from that. But 2, we're using the same actor from the prequels, and as fantastic as I think he is as an actor in this role, he's not like, it's not going to be believable for him to do necessarily the action scenes that we were going to get if we had somebody who was 30 years old and in, super fit condition or whatever. I guess my only, like, my real hang up is why does Boba Fett was the man who lived in a ship, who answered really to nobody. I know they're kind of retconning that, like, oh, we were subject to the whims of blah, 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 but Boba Fett was the guy who charged whatever he wanted because he knew he was going to get it done, and the most wealthy people in the galaxy pay him to do his job. So, there wasn't a sense in the movies that he was beholden to anybody. Like you said, he literally talks back to Darth Vader and is like, he's no good to be dead. And, like, no one else would talk to Vader like that.
That's true. But Vader, I guess, respects his ability. So that's why he didn't force choke him to death.
So I don't understand why he's interested in this shitty planet on the Outer Rim as his, like, Mar-a-Lago retirement. Like, when he has essentially the whole galaxy at his fingertips. I'm like, that's part of it. Like, I'd be interested in if there was a power struggle in the bounty hunter guild and he had to navigate through that. That'd be something that'd be interesting to me. To kind of, if he's doing what he's talking about, to kind of, like, reshape the way business is done. But I mean, it's tough because he's saying that he wants to reshape the way bounty hunters are treated, and so, like, now he's got to be a boss. But he's also worried about taking care of his little local community and making sure that everybody more or less acts morally. And he's protecting them from other people. It's just like, it's not... one of the comments earlier, I think it was, is this Will, but I'm not sure, was that he was kind of the Tony Soprano, but I didn't... And maybe we're just way too early in what the Book of Boba Fett's going to be, but I'm not seeing the Soprano in it. Like, I'm not seeing the interest in the power more than the interest in being kind of left alone from people. And just kind of like, look, we're just going to do our good thing over here. Like, let us be. And that's a different thing from, I'm ready to be the mob boss and I got to make these power plays. And sometimes people got to get hurt to do it. He's such a good guy now. He's such a good guy right now. It feels like he just is not in the right profession anymore if he's trying to be a crime lord. Right.
There isn't... You would think that Boba Fett would be sort of like a Breaking Bad type of character where he's, we don't really fully agree with his methods, but somehow we identify with his plight. Like, somehow we are on board with where he's going. But I don't know if they're really doing that. He's just kind of walking around town and trying to make deals, I guess.
So that's why I'm interested in what he's going to be coming out of this, right? Because if he's the new Jabba the Hutt coming out of this, and his little section of Tatooine is, cool and mellow and under control, how is that useful for the Mandalorian, or how is that going to be useful for Ahsoka or Obi-Wan or whoever else comes through there next? Is it just going to be to have a cool person sitting in that seat when you have, like, the cameo episode that dips into Tatooine, or is there going to be a more useful function to that?
True. Well, what are you looking forward to as far as Star Wars and just cinema, TV in general? Is there something coming up this year that you're excited to see? Is there, like, this... it doesn't even have to be a franchise. Just like any type of film or anything.
Well, let's see. Star Wars, I'm pumped for Ahsoka and for Obi-Wan. I mean, look, as much as I'm critiquing Boba Fett, I'll literally watch 10 more seasons of it. I just love Star Wars enough that I'll hate watch anything if it says Star Wars on it.
Disney's banking on that.
Yeah, they are, and they know. Like, I'm their audience who's gonna have all that, so I'm pumped with it. But I think Ahsoka can be really fun. I'm really interested in exploring the perspective of somebody who saw that the Jedi Order was kind of too stick up their ass and too tight about things and decided to leave, which is frankly why it was interesting to me in this last episode with Luke and Grogu, that Luke, who saw, like, how his father became because the Jedi were like, you're not allowed to have any emotional connections to anybody.
Yeah.
Like, why he's imposing that upon...
continuing that tradition.
That upon Grogu. Yeah, like, it feels like he'd be smarter than that and be like, yeah, we got to mix it up a little bit. But again, we got to know. We know where it's heading, right? We know that he's gonna try to kill Ben Solo and do all that and have his thing. Right. So he can't actually grow in a way that makes sense. But Ahsoka did that. Like, that's already established canon that she did that in the animated series. So I'm pumped to see that. And movie-wise, I can't wait for Top Gun to come out, man. I've been waiting 2 years for this movie to come out. It's like
a year late or 2 years late, I think, the release.
It's like, right? Please.
That looks good. I saw the preview in IMAX a couple weeks ago, and I was like, dang.
I just can't wait. And like, Tom Cruise is going to come correct with his stunts. Nobody does stunts like him. In fact, there's a podcast called Meeting Tom Cruise, I believe, where the hosts literally just interview other people who have met Tom Cruise and they talk about their experiences. It's hilarious. But they talk with Jay Ellis, who's one of the pilots in it. He was on Insecure, and he was saying that they did so much training, all the actors did so much flight training that they basically qualified to get their pilot's license. And so as a gift from Tom, he basically paid for all of them to get their license, and all they would have to do is literally just like go do that final like written test or whatever, and they would have their license.
That's out of control. That's crazy. Cool. That's pretty cool. I love how Tom Cruise is like, hey, I'm gonna hang off the side of this plane and it's gonna lift off the runway, and everybody's like, okay, cool. You don't have to, though. And he's like, I'm going to do it. Everybody's just like, all right. But that's the thing about Tom Cruise. It's like when you see him doing a thing in the movie, you know he's doing it. That's his brand now. That's his style. He's a fearless dude, apparently.
No doubt.
Other than that.
So I'm pumped for that. I'm pumped for Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. I mean, I keep wondering where we're going to hit, like, peak superhero movie saturation and everyone's gonna be over it, but these movies are getting so good, like you want to walk into them bored, and then you're just like, oh, this is actually really good, so I can't hate this. But Into the Spider-Verse was amazing, so like I'm happy to see more of that.
How
do you feel about the Batman?
I'm stoked. I hear it's gonna be like 40 hours long, but it's got 15 villains. But I was just looking at Robert Pattinson and his approach and his look, and it's a real good it's a real good match. It's all feels very like it's all working visually. So I don't like. So we had the Christian Bale, real world Batman feeling, that with some grit. And then you've got the hyper real, hyper masculine, super muscular Ben Affleck Batman, and now you've got what's the take on this? Are we going to go back to street level, like even lower street level than Dark Knight?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've heard people say that it's the noir version of Batman, but I think Batman's always had an element of noir, and I think the Christian Bale movies play with noir tropes and things like that.
The detective.
I'm interested in seeing like a real detective story in the way that the movies haven't really played with too much lately. We'll see if that's it.
Not taking a bullet fragment from the wall and somehow getting a fingerprint off of that. Christopher Nolan, that's the dumbest idea ever. What the hell was that?
Hopefully I still can't actually track that scene because he goes, so he takes the actual brick from the wall. I assume that includes the bullet in it, but the bullet's in complete fragments. So he shoots a similar gun into another wall to find a matching pattern. I guess so he knows how to reassemble the bullet.
Ladies and gentlemen,
feels like
after 15 years, Evan is going to try to explain that scene that makes no sense in The Dark Knight, which is one of the greatest comic book movies ever.
Of all time. Of all time. I mean, look, honestly, that's the scene. I'm just like, okay, so he does that. We get it. He gets fingerprints somehow.
We got to move on after that. We go like, okay, he figured something only Batman can figure. So I guess, but I am looking forward to Robert Pattinson doing like actual detective work, and then bringing him in, and he's got to find the clues, and you've got the Riddler. So the Riddler in a different version of the Riddler, and I want to see that 7 version of the Riddler. You know what I'm saying?
That would be great.
Yeah, so that would be dark. That'd be interesting, and Dark Knight, so to speak. But it would be. I am looking forward to it. I'm really, as it approaches, and the more and more posters I see, the more and more stoked I'm getting for that. But
I just don't want to see it. So you notice that over the course of the marketing campaign, they've changed kind of the tone of it, right? The beginning was all about how he is hyper brutal, hyper violent, this unleashed anger that he is, just beating regular citizens to a pulp. And I was just completely not interested in that at all. It's like, I just don't need to see some rich guy like work out his anger issues on the dude who just like robbed this liquor store. Like, I don't need that. And then now they're really leaning into this idea of the Riddler being like the Zodiac killers, and being like this dude you have to work super hard to track down, and is this mastermind, and that, like, it'd be fun to see that, because I want to see, I want to see a Batman story where he actively really has to match wits with somebody.
Yes.
And that's the one that, like, The Dark Knight was really interesting because Joker was on a rampage, but Joker is like explicitly the person that is unpredictable. So you're not necessarily playing a game of wits as much as like Batman had to get out of his own way to just like, okay, I can't explain Joker. I got to come at this from a different angle. That's one thing. But when you're playing the chess game where literally every time a piece gets knocked off of a table, like a citizen dies, and you're having to aggressively match wits with someone like that, like, that's super entertaining to me, and I hope that's what this movie delivers.
That is a great premise. That is a great, exciting way to. There are stakes. Someone's gonna die, and it's gonna be your fault, Batman. He's going to take that on for sure.
And I hope it's people that we meet and love and are excited about. Like, let us lose some people that matter, and not just random citizens or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Because we're going to be hanging with these characters for the next 7 or 8 years, probably. So we'll see. We'll see. So remind us again where we can find you and what you got going on.
Oh man, look, I'm on all the socials at Evanistics. If you want to follow me on Instagram, or
by the way, your trophy is displayed proudly right here. Evan won trivia last week, and he's got his name on the trophy. It was heroes. This week we're gonna do trivia on Thursday, as we always do, and it's going to be villains. So tune in for that. So what else? What's going on? So you're busy. You're running around town.
So look, right now, if there's anything I would say, check out Colin in Black and White. If you haven't, I really enjoyed working on that show. And right now, I'm just looking for the next gig. So hopefully I'll have some good news soon, taking a few meetings, and, just waiting to get some calls back.
Yeah, well, when you do, let us know for sure, because, we wish you the best of luck on that. And, that's this town. That's the hustle, man. I'm between jobs. I've got
always in between. Like, that's how it is. It's just like I feel like I'm in between jobs more than I'm working.
And it's crazy because when you're in between jobs and you got to hustle, you're working every day. Yeah. You're working every day, all day, and that's. I know I am, and I know as a writer, like, are you working on anything that you're developing on your own, or is there you got projects on the burners?
Yeah. So I'm hopefully I'll be starting a feature soon. I'm trying to get with one of my buddies to see if we can line up on an idea to work together. But I'm developing a pilot right now, so dope. I've spent you spend all this time of unpaid work with the hope that you're going to sell it to somebody and get paid on the tail end, right? So it's really interesting when you think about how much what our pay rate is and whatever, and it's because it's so backloaded, at least for these types of ventures. I'm not saying we don't get paid better than most regular jobs. That is very true. I'm very thankful for that. But there's like the amount of work that you put in before the actual paycheck comes is a ton. Yeah. And like those are just hours like you can't even count. I've been working on this for the last year of the pandemic, trying to get things right, get pitch materials together, you know, working on my drafts, and it's just like in the hopes that somebody gets as hyped about it as I do to purchase it. So,
but that's the love of the game, right? That's totally
I mean, I'm not gonna say I wouldn't have it any other way, because I wouldn't mind being paid to develop my own ideas.
Right.
But
it's like spec
paychecks.
Yeah. That's true. That's true. Well, Evan, it's awesome as always to hang out with you on the air on Aristotle.
Yes, sir.
And it's really cool takes on Boba Fett and Mando and Star Wars and Spider-Man. If you guys want to follow him, you can follow him at Evanistics. And you can check out this as a podcast if you tuned in late. It's going to be up on Spotify tomorrow. So check it out. And also other platforms, wherever you get podcasts. Wherever you get your podcast, it's going to be there. All right. Well, you have a great night, man. And I hope to see you on Thursday in the chat playing some more. See if you could maintain your title as trivia champion.
I'm going to do my best. I want to hold on to this trophy. Yeah, man, I love talking to you. So we're gonna have to make this happen again very soon.
100%. All right. Good night, everybody. Thanks, Evan.